Okay, off we go.
Right, we haven't got Ronnie. Is Ronnie still struggling
To
with
be,
his house move?
well, the last I heard, Barbara, it's fallen through. He's pulled out of it.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
poor Ronnie and Gillian.
I know I think he's been mucked about, and he was certainly the last time he was on here, which was almost a month ago now. He was at a very, very low ebb. Um, trying to be cheerful, but obviously this has been playing on his mind a lot. So I think him and Gillian are now concentrating on trying to get on with something else in terms of moving. So I hope it all goes well for him.
Yeah, send them our best wishes if you
I
speak
will
to them
do. I'll drop
again.
him. Yeah, I'll drop him. Well, I won't. I'll probably drop him an email and just ask him how he's getting on.
Yeah. Nice to see Martin back again after his adventures.
Yep.
Just just looking at the aerial photographs that you've put onto Facebook as well, Martin. Those are very interesting post-war
Yeah,
photographs.
I only just found that website only about half an hour ago, actually. So yeah, some very interesting photos on there.
Yeah, yeah. Spend more time later looking at those. Yeah.
Yep. There's more and more gradually being discovered, but it's a long drawn out process, isn't it?
Mm. I think it's just a bit of a case of spending a bit of time searching, but then there's so many bits and pieces that just pop up when you don't expect it. You might be searching for something else, and you go, "Oh, hang on, this is interesting. What's this?" And you open something up and go, "Oh, wow, look at all these photos," or something, or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's just somebody's. I looked on Facebook briefly before I came on, and somebody was talking about some FEPOW stuff at Banbury Museum.
Mm.
And there's a local coach company that is doing a trip to Banbury. So I think, here we go. I might have a go at that rather than drive there myself. Just have a look and see what's there. It's supposedly going there on market day, so I'll have a look up the museum website and see when it's open.
Mm.
You never know.
Mm.
Just never know. From what somebody was telling me, or I was joining on an email exchange, the Royal Artillery do have an archive at Larkhill, but it would appear most of their records are in deep store, i.e. you can't get at them. So I'm going to see if I can go back to that person and say, well, I'm looking for this particular piece of information. If you've got it, is there any chance that if there's enough notice, I could visit and have a look at the records, bearing in mind that Larkhill is about 3 hours drive from here, which in Australia is nothing, it's around the corner, but in the UK it's 3 hours drive. Now I'm watching some programs in Australia, and it's absolutely,
Okay.
the first one was, I think last Thursday or Friday, and there's another one coming this week. They just go around the different areas. And this particular one, I'd have to look it up, but it was absolutely fascinating. It really was. It's a side I've never seen. I've been to Australia, but obviously not all of Australia. But
it was a very large country.
Yes, indeed. It was just incredibly interesting to just what they were talking about. It's
Yep.
because they deliberately set wildfires there, don't they, on certain parts of Australia?
Yeah. Oh,
And it was in that area just to burn it back, to avoid it becoming even worse if they left it to do it naturally. And,
Well, they do the same in Southeast Asia as well. They have burn-offs most years to sort of burn back a lot of the jungle. Otherwise, it just gets too much of a fire fuel.
Yeah.
I think we've started to do that over here, actually, Martin. I don't know if you've seen last year and even this year where Saddleworth Moor was on fire, and last year we had various places on fire. So there you go, with climate change, we're doing the same over here now.
Doing back burning,
Some of it's unintentional. Martin, did you have any more feedback on the film that you were doing for the celebration of the 200 years of Singapore?
Not yet, no. I'm still waiting to get some information back from them. So I'd imagine it's probably still in the editing stage, or with the directors or whatever. But yeah, I've been chasing them up recently. Actually, that's just last week, so I'm just waiting to hear back and find out what the scheduling might be, because it was proposed to be aired in April. So
yeah, I do hope they'll let us have a look at it over here, because it's of interest.
I've had a look. I've had a look on CNA, and you actually can live stream off the CNA website anyway. So I think it's just a registration process. So I'm going to keep an eye out for it, and so yeah, once I know what's happening, I'll pass the information on.
Right.
Be interesting.
Yeah. So it's been a bit slow in the communication over the last few weeks, but yeah, hopefully it's all still going ahead.
I would have thought so. Big event for them. Big event this year, and Barbara, who was it? Was it Margaret saying that Jaya is going to be concentrating more now on the Singapore aspect rather than the POW aspect?
It was myself. I'd picked that up somewhere. Right. It's becoming a different sort of museum, especially Changi. Right. That they're doing it in a different way now. So it won't be a case, I think, of what we like to do, where you go in and you're looking at the nitty-gritty things that have been collected. It's going to be a more sort of, I don't know, whether it would be a visual thing with more films and that. As modern times go by, I think what we get from museums when we actually see the actual artifacts that are there may change to being photographs or films about things. I think we as children of FEPOWs like to be able to get our hands onto things or look at things, and I think future generations won't have that same connection.
No, that's right. I mean, I was speaking to the couple of guys at Kew who are winning some medals and all the rest of it in the various museums. And I said, oh yeah, we got an invite to the National Army Museum, and Mick just looked up and said, forget it.
Oh.
I said, why? He said, it's rubbish. But when I've seen photos of it, it's done for the generation of today going on.
Because
we've had our turn, if you like to put it that way.
And
it's like the IWM, isn't it?
Yeah, and then their visual, appreciation of things is different to perhaps what we were. We like to sort of think this was the real thing, and if we can't touch it, we like to actually be able to see it there. But when you go to the IWM in Manchester, it's all behind glass. It's all a bit sterile, really, isn't it?
Well, the IWM in London, when I was a kid, which it's got to be about 60 years ago, because I'm 70 in September. My dad took me to the IWM. All these lovely galleries and all these beautiful models and things like this. All gone.
Yeah.
It's just one big open space in the centre now, with obviously things that people can look at, and they've got interactive screens, and that seems to be the way things are now.
Yeah, exactly.
For the generations to come. So, I hope nothing much we can do about that, unfortunately.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
oh God, sorry. Go on, Kevin.
I was going to say, a few weeks ago I went to Bletchley Park.
Oh, all right, yes.
The bit
That's my neck of the woods.
The bit I was particularly interested was about the Japanese, breaking the Japanese codes and that. That's on display. That's really interesting. How the I think I was one of the guys in charge. He learned himself Japanese within a month. I don't know how he did that, but it was absolutely really, really interesting. That is, and as I say, you can still see the machines that they used. They have that bomber. That's still so that's pretty good. That's a really, really interesting. That was.
Yeah, that's one place that's on my wish list. In actual fact, I'm going to try and do it this year. But being at Kew, oh gosh, how many years ago now? I'm still working, so it might be a good 10 years ago. There was a couple going to Kew that I don't see now, but they were working on stuff for Bletchley Park.
Oh, right.
And we just got talking there, had a cup of coffee, and he said, what do you do? So I said, I'm Far Eastern Prisoners of War. And we were chatting about that. So he said, you do know Bletchley Park, wrote the Japanese codes before the Americans. So I said, no, I didn't, but I did wonder. And I was doing a bit of research with somebody a couple of years ago. he was first captured he was captured in Shanghai on HMS Petrel, one of the gunboats that was moored up in the harbour there. And it would appear on the 8th of December. Japanese officer rowed across, or was rowed across, got onto the gunboat and said, "Please surrender your ship." Now, the crew on the gunboat were well aware that actually we were at war with Japan. So they said, "Sorry, can't do that." Right, fine. And he left. Went to the gunboat behind them, which was an American one, which was, I think, the USS Ward. Got on there, "Please surrender your ship." That's exactly what they did. They had no idea that the United States was at war with Japan, but the British knew 4 hours before.
Mm-hmm.
The Petrel was sunk at its moorings, basically, and he was taken prisoner. I did the research for his daughter, which he took to him on his 103rd birthday, and 2 days after his 103rd birthday, he passed away. So she used the research as a eulogy for him as well. So that was rather nice. But you think to yourself, I wonder how much more we don't know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I read somewhere which was quite interesting. You know about all the evacuation ships that left Singapore. Something that always bothered me was they all sailed straight into the Japanese fleet. In the case of my father's, where they went down to Bangka Strait off the coast of Sumatra, and they all just went one after the other. And then you would think, why didn't they radio back and say, "Don't come this way"? But it turns out that they actually broke up all the machines in Singapore because they knew the Japanese were going to come. So all the encryption machines and all the stuff was all broken up. So it didn't matter. They probably were sending information back to Singapore.
It was just not getting through.
But it was just not getting through. Yeah.
That's strange, actually. That I've just been looking on the Malayan Volunteers site because, as I was talking to you about Keith the other day, I'm trying to find out now. My interest is going on to the SOEs, and I thought I'd look on the Malayan Volunteers site, which is a very organised site. I was very impressed.
Jonathan Moffat is a very organised
man. And
man.
Rosemary Fell.
Yes, indeed.
And what you were just saying about, Kevin, I was reading about the evacuees ships that were sunk and the massacre of the nurses on the beach. So it does make you wonder if that could have been avoided if they kept the equipment going. But it was too late for them, wasn't it? And they were all killed. Yeah. Actually, I've got a favour to ask of you, Keith. Going on from this, I don't know if any of you on Facebook follow the Greatest Generation site.
No.
But yesterday it was just what I needed because my daughter had said, "What are you going to do today, Mum?" And I said, "I'm going to start my looking into the SOEs thing," and they'd actually got a thing about this day back in history. I'm trying to see if I've still got it on here, and so. What it was, it's about the SOE, which is Force 136 under Major Hugh Seagram.
It was initially under Seagram, and then it changed because Seagram.
I haven't got that far yet, thank you.
No, well, basically, I think Hugh Seagram, if my memory serves me well, the Japanese knew where he was, and he knew he was working with the Karen natives in Burma.
Yep, that's what it says on this, yeah.
And they threatened to massacre the Karen unless he handed himself in, which he did.
Right. If you haven't seen this site, then I do recommend it. It's called The Greatest Generation.
Oh, right.
And it starts off, you'll find it, on this day in World War II history, March 15th, 1944. Major Hugh Seagram was the leader of a small group of officers, and it goes on to mention about the Karens. Japanese arrested 270 Karens, tortured and killed many of them. So so it's really interesting. But what I've also found is a site at the some files at the National Archives. Have you ever looked into those, or is this not an interest of yours?
No. What's the reference? It says hopefully.
HS1.
There we go. MI. It's one of the MIs.
Right.
HS1, right.
But the thing is, there are 350 files, apparently. It goes from 1940 to 1947.
Right. Yes, I did some research, long ago. Sometimes I think it's another life, but it wasn't. It was this one for Lynette Silver. And she was after HS files for the Operation Jaywick. No,
Yeah.
wrong. Grimel, the second one. And I sent her a load of those, or photocopies of the files over here. I sent those to her, so I can certainly have a look through and see what's there.
And also, what I did yesterday was I ordered 2 books off Amazon.
So did I.
Right, Burma 44, which I'm hoping will be helpful, by James
Right.
Holland, and SOE in the Far East by Charles Cruikshank. So I'm hoping.
Oh, that'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, so I'm
I've
hoping.
read a book called Tigers Burning Bright, but that doesn't seem to
coming up. Yeah,
it doesn't seem to cover what I was looking for. It's
Yeah.
interesting, very, very interesting, but doesn't seem to cover the Force 136, which is what I was after.
well, the Burma 44 should be here very, very soon because it's already been dispatched. The SOE in the Far East, so I'll bring them to our next Birmingham meeting.
Right.
And have a look. Hopefully by then I'll have perused them and see what's coming up. But if you have any insight into those files on at the National Archives.
If I'm up there next week, I will speak to a guy called Phil, who is his main sphere of interest is the HS files. So I'll speak to him and see what he can put me in the right direction.
Okay. Oh, that'd be great. I mean, if there's anything that you think is worth printing off and we need to pay, then please just pass the costs on to me.
Well, I'll photograph it.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys, if I'm boring you, but
£1.30 a copy. You don't want to pay that.
I see.
So
they allow you to.
No, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to print off anything anymore.
Okay, I'll pay for your bail then.
No, they've stopped all that. They've taken away all the cameras.
Yeah.
Taken away all the printers. And we used to have beautiful big flat screen copiers. You just bring the top down. You could do wonderful photocopies. They've stopped all that. It's all part of this stuff. Well, if it's on Find My Past Ancestry, you don't need to copy the records. Or you can come here, log into the site as a guest. It doesn't cost you anything. You can download those records that you want onto your email if you've given them one, and you've got 7 days to download them.
Yeah.
So that's how they work it now. There's a lot of the old school, if you like. I suppose I'm one of those as well that think basically they're dumbing down the archives.
Yeah.
You ask people questions and you get this blank look now. So.
Oh, it's really sad.
It is very, very sad. Very, very sad. But I just keep plodding away at what I'm plodding away at and see how we go. But I know what's a bit of a worry is that I'm looking for Meg Parks for this exhibition she's doing. And we're looking at 3 brothers. But one died in Europe. He died in a German POW camp. We know the camp. We know he died of a brain hemorrhage. Brain tumour. But I can't find the records to Find My Past. So they've obviously not been photographed. And this is the liberation questionnaires. Now, I know they're out and about because they've not been photographed. But obviously he passed away, so there won't be one of those. But it's his German POW card. And those files are still withheld. So I'm going to have to try and ask somebody about that and see if I can get a copy of it or get a look at this particular card. I might get away with it, I might not. I can but try.
Yep.
What's everybody else been up to?
Yeah, talking about books, I just bought the Lizzie Oliver book. That's pretty good. I'm just getting it. I haven't read it properly, but I know it's a lot of money, but actually they're going to start putting it out in paperback now for about £26.
That's what I'm waiting for, Kevin.
I think it's actually out now.
Yes, I think it's due out in June.
Yeah. But I had to get it because I was doing some backstory research into my father's company, and there was a few of his men were actually on the Subaltern Railway, and I just wanted to see if there was any information on that about that. But there was one thing I was particularly interested in. There was quite a few. There was about 3 or 4 of them escaped from Padang. And I've never come across that story. I don't know whether they actually got away or they got captured or what. I just know that they actually escaped from Padang. So I was hoping that there might be some information in the book about that, but I haven't read it yet. So,
well, the way to find out is if you, I mean, do you belong to Find My Past, Kevin?
oh, the library's got it. I haven't got it. I can
No,
go to
okay. Because a way to find that out, if you let me have the names, if of the ones that escaped, names, if you got the numbers
oh yeah,
and the regiment, I can have a look and find my past. If there's no POW card, then it might look good.
yeah.
Could do that for you.
Yeah, I can email them because I have actually done the roll call for the whole company. I've got that now.
Oh, right, brilliant.
Doing the I've got it on a website. I just have a website which is like obviously open to everybody to have a look at. And any information I get about the men, I put like a little link on, so you can click on the link and it tells you like he might have his questionnaire or whatever.
Right.
But that was a great one. Is a good few months ago, a lady got in contact with us. She was the great niece of the commanding officer, and the commanding officer died, but she wasn't really sure what had happened to him. It turns out he actually drowned on one of the ships escaping from Singapore.
Oh, right.
It was Michael Pether.
Yep.
He did a load of research on these escaping ships, and he was the one that found out what actually happened to him. So I was able to put her in contact with Michael.
Yeah.
And,
No, he's the guy on the escape ships, most definitely.
yeah.
But it's frustrating because you go to Kew, and the one that particularly one I was looking for a Royal Marine, is somebody I met at the memorial service for the Prince of Wales and Repulse last year, and he escaped. But the only ship they could narrow it down to is the Matahari. But of course, the Matahari says there were 50 naval personnel on this ship, and doesn't name them. So we can't prove it, can't disprove it.
Yeah.
It's just a case of just keep plodding through and seeing how we go. But I think Michael was over here last year.
Yeah. Oh, he's got 3 good things on the Core Weeble site.
Oh yeah. Well, every time he updates, every time he does one, he sends a copy to me and a copy to Jonathan. So we just put it onto the site under his name, obviously, because it's his research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like you were saying. It's a shame, Keith, about how if Q's going to go down that route. You know, how hard is it going to be for it to find things out? You know.
Well, we're yeah. I mean, basically, at the moment, quite a bit of the POW records are still about, which is why I'm just going through them and trying to log them now and find out what's actually there. And the way a friend of mine did it, he said, well, you go and look at the paper indexes for the old stuff and just photograph them. But it's knowing which WO files to look in. But you just get an idea. It's WO, Colonial Office files. So, for instance, although there is no nominal role for the FMSVF in WO361, which is the Nelson files, or the Straits Settlement Volunteer Force, you look at the Colonial Office files, the medal rolls, you've got a very nice list of names. But that's all. You don't know whether they were prisoners, whether they died. Oh, yes, sorry, you do know if they died. We know if they were taken prisoner or what. So it's a case of, right, we got the roll. Where do we go from here? Very, very frustrating in some respects.
Yes.
But no, I mean, you go up to Kew sometimes. I mean, for instance, Paul Bailey, who's a guy I know that he does medals, he's been going to Kew for 30 years. And we just sit there now and we watch the numbers on a Saturday, very, very small. They've got caterers in there at the moment who I don't think can be making money at all. We used to have a very nice TV in the canteen, or the restaurant as they call it. That's gone. Nice big flat screen TV. They're taking that out. So I don't quite know what's happening at the archives at the moment, but make hay while the sun shines, basically.
Yes, that's yeah.
But I mean, mine's a 2-hour drive. I mean, where Kevin lives, where Martin lives, it's Well, where's your archive? One is Melbourne, isn't it? And the other one's Canberra.
Yeah, well, there is an archive in Perth, but obviously it hasn't got a lot of British stuff in it, but certainly a lot of Australian. But yeah, it's hard to source what you want to source from the other side of the world. I'm very, very lucky in that I've got a research partner in the UK who is like yourself. He's traditional Q researcher, and he's helped me immensely over the last 5 years or so.
Brilliant.
And we happened to hook up accidentally just over an email conversation, and yeah, we struck up a great friendship over the last 5 years, and we're still exchanging backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards.
Brilliant.
And, yeah, so it's been fantastic. So I mean that's one of the reasons why I've been able to gain so much of the files from Q. But I mean, I've been there 3 times myself over the last 5 or 6 years, and spent a lot of time, extracting information and photographing files, etc. But yeah, John's really helped me immensely. Without John, I probably couldn't have got to the point I did, and gaining all the information that I managed to, especially when I was researching the information on the 5th Bedfords, and because we did it all the tradesman's way, if you like. Before Find My Paths really kicked into gear, we were going to Q and pulling out all the index cards. So I've got 940 Beds and Hearts index cards because we went through every single box and pulled every single one out and photographed every single one. And of course, now it's all online now. So I've done that the tradesman's way, and then of course the same thing with the liberation questionnaires. We've been backwards and forwards, and we've extracted all the Beds and Hearts liberation questionnaires and that are available. And of course, that is a project you guys are involved with, and it's slowly coming into sort of a completion stage. And so, but it's just a minefield of information, isn't it? I mean, you can get files and you can read stuff and it doesn't make sense, and then you go away and you learn more and you learn more, and you come back and you read it and you go, right, that's what that means, and that's stuff starts to fall into place, and you start to learn a great deal more. And then of course it sends you back in a direction you were probably looking at previously, and then it opens new doors, and you sort of it's been really, really interesting. But yeah, I've been very lucky, I must admit, that John's just he's a retired lawyer, and he's probably about 60. I'm at 64, 65 now, and he's just probably his focus mainly is war crimes, because he's been from a background of law, and he's really focused heavily on the Hufukumaru, and and he's done enormous amounts of research into that. He posts regularly on that site, World War II Talk.
Yep.
So all the stuff you see on Hufukumaru in that website, it's all from John. It's all his work. So yeah, he's been terrific, like yourself. He helps a lot of people, and he'll give people the right information. What files to look at Q, and very, very, very helpful. So yeah, that's just without John, living in Australia, I couldn't have got that information. It's just been amazing, and he's been great as well, in terms, because I'm very respectful of all the help he's given me. So he's also enabled me to help some other people.
Good. Brilliant.
So gave a lot of stuff to John Cooper in the early part when he was researching in Singapore, and of course a lot of stuff's been we've passed on to TBRC as well. So it's sort of it's that community thing, isn't it? It's just making sure everyone's getting the right information, so they can so they can actually build their embrace their database and build on it, because we photographed all the hospital files at Q, all the 347
Yeah.
files, and they're amazing. They're just absolutely amazing. The information you can get from them, and it's not necessarily that someone was suffering from beriberi or malaria or whatever. Some of the files tell you what railway battalion they were in, and they tell you that whether they were evacuated back to base camp or they were sent back to duty. And so when you got problems with guys who don't fill out liberation questionnaires and you got blanks, you can go back through the hospital records and go, hang on, he was at Chung Kai and he was in group number 6, and so we know group numbers working battalion number 6 went to Tarkanoon, and then from Tarkanoon we know they went to Krangrai and all that type of thing. So it's really, really useful how you can actually put that information together. So you start to build a picture on, you know where various railway battalions work. We know that 1, 6 and 8 were at Tarkanoon 203 camp, and in Tarkanoon 206 camp we know what ones were there, and then we know which ones were Swintons, and when they went up to Nam Choi Yai and further up to Swinton's camp. So it really, really helps put things into perspective and start building that path if you haven't got the information already.
Yeah, there's a friend. Well, I used it for a friend of mine. She was, we met 2004, and the friendship still goes on. And she's got a granddad's diary, which she sent me a copy of. She said, "Oh, we've got this big blank space in it." Okay, and a big blank space in his questionnaire too. So we looked it up in the hospital files, and that's why he didn't write anything in the diary. He was in hospital, in and out of hospital with various, diseases and all the rest of it. So yeah, they are useful, very useful.
Yep, absolutely.
Another thing, and this is one for you. Here we go. Now, Michael Pether, when he came over, bought me a chip from a camera. He said, "There you are. There's the 100 not liberation questionnaires, war crimes forms for the Brits that are in the New Zealand archives." But unfortunately, bringing it through customs, it wiped the chip. So I think I've said to Michael, is there any way we could still get those over here? But I'm wondering whether there'd be any in the Australian archives for Brits liberated through Australia. I can ask Di Elliott, but that's not a problem.
Yeah, I've actually looked. I went to the Shrine of Remembrance at Melbourne a few years ago, and I asked a lot of questions there because a lot of the Brits were at the convalescent camps in Melbourne,
right?
And so a lot of them came through Sydney and ended up in Melbourne, and a lot went to New Zealand as well. But I've been trying to work out, because I've got a bunch of the guys that I research that I know were in Australia, because and I found the information through newspaper articles. Like guys being repatriated, and such and such is coming home, and he's currently in Australia, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so I started to look at that, and then found that there was a convalescence camp in Australia, but it's been really, really hard to try and find a lot more information around it. Now, all the Red Cross cards for the Australians are on the website of the Melbourne University, and you can actually look them up and get all the Red Cross details. It's high level stuff, but it does give some relative information of where they were liberated from and et cetera, et cetera. But someone did post at one time that the British records were there, but I've never been able to find them, and I've looked and looked, but nothing comes up. But there must be some record somewhere, because there was a large number of guys who were liberated from Japan who actually came down to Australia and New Zealand. Because it was the Formidable that brought a lot of Australians back, and they diverted from Manila down to New Zealand, and then went back up the Pacific. So it was a big diversion, but it was just to bring a lot of Australians back, but a lot of British came back on that as well. So it's just trying to piece it together and trying to find out, where those records might be. And I must admit, I'm yet to have a look at the Perth archives, because there's a possibility that there'll be some records there too, because we know that a lot of them did come back through Fremantle as well.
Yep.
So there is a possibility that might be something there.
Well, fingers crossed.
Mm.
Yeah, can but hope. Food for thought, no. But yes, I mean, it's we've got to find out a lot more. I mean, I've probably got to start making times. I live on my own, that's the problem, so I have to do everything else. But I would like to see what the Red Cross has actually got, if they will let you have a look.
Yeah. Well, like I say, the Melbourne University, you've got all the Australian records, and you can access them online. But you need to know the name of the person that you're actually searching. You can't just bring up, like, it's a bit like Find My Past. You've got to be specific in your detail what you're looking for. So what I did is, just to test it out and have a look, is that I just pulled up a few Australians that I did know of and their service numbers, and then it did start to bring some of their records up.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting anyway.
But I did do the same thing with some of the guys that I knew were in Australia. I started putting their details, their names and service numbers in, and blah, blah, but no, I didn't find anything. But that's contrary to what someone had posted previously, saying that that there was British records there as well.
Oh.
But how many, I don't know. But like I say, there must be a record somewhere.
Yeah. I would have thought there would be in this country.
Yeah, you would imagine so. Yeah.
I know when I did contact the Red Cross years ago, when I first started out, and it's about 2003. And I said, I've been researching a couple of years, and I'd got hold of his liberation questionnaire through the back door. And I said, can you tell me more information about my father? I said, I know the camps he was in. And she said, well, you know more than we do. And that was the end of the conversation. So they didn't tell us, say, whether they did have records over here or whether they're in Geneva. I know there's a lot of stuff in Geneva. Certainly that's where all the World War I records are. So you would think, as everything went from the Japanese through Geneva, who then distributed it to the Brits, the Australians, New Zealanders, whoever, that they would have the information there. I think we've lost Martin, haven't we?
Oh, yeah.
Right, okay. Anybody got anything else at all? Or?
Yeah, just actually what you were talking about, Keith. That, as I say, that is like the sort of black hole, if you like, of my father's time as a Japanese prisoner of war. I don't know how he actually got home. He didn't get home till February 1946. So it was nearly about 6 months.
Yeah.
So
you can bet your life, Kevin, he was somewhere else.
Yeah, I reckon I think we talked about it before. It looks like he went via Australia. That's where it's looking more and more lately. I did get in contact with the Red Cross, but I never heard nothing back from them. So I don't know. It's just like Martin said, if there's going to be records somewhere.
I certainly would have thought so.
Yeah. I did have a name of a ship. It actually called in, a hospital ship. It called in at Pelhambang. That I thought maybe he was taken on that, because there was actually pictures of the taken prisoners obviously on stretchers. Some of them were on stretchers, and they were loading them onto this hospital ship. So that's possibly maybe that was a ship. I don't know. Like you say,
maybe, but where did it go from there, or did it go back via, say, it didn't go to Australia? Did it go to Singapore and on to India?
Yeah.
So a lot of them stayed in India to try and recover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a mystery. I mean, for the be 6 months, like, where was he? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, if he was delayed that much coming home, then he would have been too sick to travel, I would have thought.
Oh yeah. I mean, even when he got back here, he ended up going to Scotland. was put into hospital in Scotland.
Right.
He had about a month up there before they actually allowed him to come back home to Tyneside.
All right. Good.
Yeah, so yeah, it's just to say these are like you say here. It's one of these things you've just got to keep plugging away at to try and find the information. Really.
Well, I'm reading a book at the minute. I would like to say I'm enjoying it, but I'm not. It's about Unit 731. And I often wonder, and I'm not going to do any research into it, it's just wondering whether this unit was operating actually in the field in the Far East as well. When I say the Far East, I mean Burma, particularly. Thailand, possibly, but Burma particularly. And the reason I say that is I came across a questionnaire by somebody that's was held in Rangoon jail. And it's an area I'm looking at because these guys might not be on the FEPOW database. And this guy's, they say to you, what diseases did you have? So he said, oh, yellow fever, malaria, and jaundice. And the next question was, how did you contract them? Answer, the Japanese injected me. So that's the second one I've seen. The first one, I didn't make a note of the file number, which is my own stupid fault. So I'm going to go back looking for that. That'll be somewhere in the war crimes files. But you just look at it, you think, I wonder. Because a lot of these guys, when they were captured in Burma, just seemed to disappear. You know, some of them were in Rangoon jail. Got a guy that was in Rangoon jail, died in Rangoon jail. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission couldn't tell me where he died, but somebody else could. It's a bit strange. But he's not logged anywhere on the Rangoon jail roll. Or in Air 40, I think was the other one, which gives a list of people who were in Rangoon jail when it was liberated. But the roll of Rangoon jail tells you those 400 odd that were actually marched out as human shields. And they got as far as a place called Pegu, and the Japanese commander said, we're not doing this. You're free. So they were released. And Allied aircraft orbiting around at the time, large body of men on the ground. Brits haven't got that far, must be Japanese. So they got strafed, and quite a number were killed, sadly, including the commander. So, yes, I'm trying to settle down and just concentrate on one thing at a time rather than jumping all over the place, basically. Kingfisher research, I think they call it. You just jump all over the place. So I'm just going to stop and, yes, that might lead somewhere else, so make a note of it and put it in your notebook and follow it up later. So concentrate on what you're doing. But,
that's right. It's easy to get distracted, though.
Oh, isn't it just? Isn't it just? Yeah. It's like I was doing something with Ronnie. We were doing on HMS, I think it was one of the gunships. Might have been Dragonfly. We could track, they listed all the casualties and the men that were on there, the crew, but we were 3 adrift. So Ronnie said, well, I can't understand this. He said, they must have died as prisoners. And I looked at the dates. And, yeah. And I don't know why. I Googled, I think it was the Dragonfly. Don't quote me on it. I Googled the ship, and there was a destroyer with the same name. And these 3 guys actually died in the Battle of the North Cape, which was the sinking of the Scharnhorst. And they were casualties. So that answered that question. But it's quite strange, You think, oh, right, okay. But I didn't follow that one up. Got the information, that was it. Project done, move on.
It's interesting when you're researching. I mean, I read books and only get so far because sometimes I'm so appalled with what I'm reading. I put them away. But you're doing something for Ron Mockford at the moment, I know, Keith. And something that he did tell me, and this is the emotional side of things and how it hits you, is that, when I asked him how he got through everything, and he said, because the one time when we were sitting together, he suddenly sort of slid this little wooden box to me, and it was the 21st present that he was made for by fellow prisoners in some metal from a crashed American plane and put into a little teak. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm not sure if you've seen it as yet.
No, Keith. I haven't. His daughter approached me and she said, "I understand you want to speak to my dad." And I said, I drew out of earshot. I said, "I'm very, very conscious." I said, "We had an example recently of where," and I said, "It wasn't me, it was a TV company." I said, "But start questioning somebody who was I think this guy was an internee, but internee or FEPOW, it doesn't matter. And although you're interested, very interested in what they went through and all the rest, and them to tell their story, are you opening doors that would better remain shut?"
Yeah.
And I said to her, "That's my one fear.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that." And she said, "Oh, no, he seems quite happy about it." So I've got to look up all that documentation. I've got it somewhere.
What he did say to me was that because I think he was one of the younger chaps there, because he'll be 96 in June, and he said, "I wouldn't have got through it apart from my one mate." He said that, and I said to him, "Well, who was it? Did he survive?" He said, "No, he died," but he couldn't or wouldn't tell me what his name was. But he said he wouldn't have survived but for this other FEPO. I think a lot of them were probably like that, especially the younger ones were chivied along by an older and perhaps more mature FEPO. But I did find it strange that if he said, virtually saying that he owed this man his life for being able to, get him through it when times were hard. Whether, my thought is, did he not want to remember this man's name, or didn't want to tell me this man's name? So just as a thought for you.
I mean, I have heard he did lose his mate. I've heard that from someone else.
Right.
But I don't know. It may be the memory is too painful.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Because he was with
he might be,
H Force at the time, I think.
Yeah, he might, with talking to you, do it. I mean, when he was and I were talking, it was in the middle of a group of people, so he perhaps didn't want to then. But it sort of brings back what we were talking about when we hear about FEPOs and we don't know whether to contact them or not. Sometimes you think, is it going to be too painful for them to do it at that time of life? Will it stir up all these bad memories?
Well, again, it's the Japanese. This is the second one. Third. They seem to be very interested in producing something about the prisoners for the 75th anniversary. Now, reading this book on 731, a couple of men who were attached to the unit or with the unit have actually told the Japanese what they actually did. And they told them, they said, because they don't want to see a far right-wing government lead Japan down the same path, which is exactly what's happening now. And the Japanese people don't believe them. Just don't believe them at all. Can't see how that would happen and all the rest of it. So I think there are people over there. I mean, the Japanese POW network know what happened, and they've obviously had their trials and tribulations. But this book, as I say, I just wanted to read it. Is interesting for what it tells you that the Japanese, in actual fact, the next of kin of three of the victims actually went to court, and in each case was thrown out. So,
well, as we know from the war crimes, a lot of the Japanese got away with it because if they'd been in areas where they were doing medical research, the Americans wanted the results of their research.
That's right. They're saying that some of these files now in Japan are stamped with, I think it's Fort Dickin, I think it was in Maryland. So the reports are stamped up. So they've obviously been to the States, been copied, and then returned.
Yeah.
So,
but the people that should have been prosecuted for carrying out the tests of things like tetanus and that sort of thing.
Never were.
But they weren't prosecuted, or they got their death sentence was.
Only people that prosecuted them were the Russians, where some fell into their hands. And those guys, when they fell into the Russians' hands, told the Russians exactly what happened. The Russians wanted to interview some of the Japanese that the Americans had. And the Americans said, of course you can. And they said to the Japanese, under no circumstances do you say to them that you've spoken to us. Under no circumstances. And please don't divulge the information that you've given to us. So there was that going on in the background. But yeah, it's I don't know. But most of those men ended up in high positions in medical science in Japan and were very rich.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And also, as it says in the war crimes, the Japanese were represented by high-flying Japanese solicitors, barristers, or the equivalents of, whereas the prosecutors were usually military men who weren't so good at talking and putting the other side of things. So yeah, it's a whole unfortunate period of history in that respect. But and we'll see this. I mean, when we watch the film Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, there's, at the end there's the war crimes and things in that. And one thing that always stands out to me is when the one Japanese says to the commanding officer in the film who says, you can't do that to my men, the Geneva Convention covers them. And he says the Japanese aren't signed up to the Geneva Convention, so we have to remember that was the situation, wasn't it? So,
well, it's interesting, and Martin might know more about this than I can. But when the Japanese were taken prisoner at the end of the war, they weren't treated as POWs. They were called surrendered military personnel. And I've got to read a book on the subject, but reading between the lines, and I could be wrong, that means the British did not have to adhere to the Geneva Convention.
All right.
So more on that when I find out. Another book to buy.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting.
I often wonder why they were ever classed like that, and I've just got a hint about it, and I thought, oh, that's a bit. And evidently the Americans protested. The Americans are furious. You can't treat them like that.
I'm sure they didn't treat them as badly as they treated us. But
there was quite a death toll in Singapore, I believe. I'm going to have to try and find a book where I did read a bit about it, but they were worked on Changi Airdrome for a start off. That's the one project they had to complete. And then they had lots of other projects to do, and their rations weren't that brilliant, evidently, and they were made to work out in the hot sun and all the rest, like the POWs were.
That's worth looking at as well. Then that's interesting.
I don't know whether there'll be anything in the official files at Kew. It'd be interesting if there is.
Yeah.
But this particular book, I'll have to get hold of it in my next batch of book buying, and see what references they quote. Go from there.
A lot of the information in the war crimes files are very very generic. There's not a great deal in terms of the way the Japanese were treated at the end when they became prisoners, but a lot of the evidence that the Allies put forward is you start to read it and you tend to start reading the same sort of thing over and over and over again. It's on similar lines, but I find that some of the defence abstracts are quite interesting. In that, the Japanese like to portray that they were providing plenty of food and they were providing this and they were providing that, and you have to sort of read between the lines sometimes, and part of it was circumstance, because I just been reading a lot of the Japanese versions of the building of the railway, and they were equally as pressured as what the POWs were. They had deadlines to meet, and they had, they were answering to Tokyo and their seniors. And you talk about the railway engineers in the 5th and the 9th regiments. They were under extreme pressure to get this railway done, and
very much so.
And trying to get the supplies to the camps was became virtually impossible when the monsoons broke and all of that. But it's interesting when you read what their hardships were and what they actually had to endure and try and work through. And they actually sort of portray that we didn't deliberately sort of treat them badly. It's just that we couldn't supply them, and we couldn't meet all their needs, which. Okay, that's obviously their version of events, and so there's going to be a certain degree of truth in there. But then, of course, there's also that horrible, sadistic brutality side of it, and that got passed down. But it's interesting reading their version of events as well as our, the allied version of events.
Tales by Japanese Railway Soldiers. Is that the one?
That's yes.
Yeah.
Construction of the Thailand-Burma Railway. I actually downloaded it last week. You can download various chapters and just pay per chapter. And I was reading it during the week, and some of the information is really really fascinating. And they talk about various work areas and how they actually set about work tasks and the blasting and the problems they faced as well as the POWs. So yeah, it's quite interesting because they most of the railway engineers weren't tried by the War Crimes Tribunal because they were basically there just carrying out a function and a job. And it's interesting reading their point of view because they were basically quite honest about, well, these were the circumstances. This is what we were faced with, and this is how we had to cope and deal with it. And they touch on and they do touch on various points that they understand. The war crimes took place, and many people got punished and hung and et cetera, and they've sort of in a way protested a bit against that. But then on the other hand, they also raised the fact that many officers produced many favourable affidavits for various camp leaders who which went to their favour. So it's interesting when you start to weigh. You've got to weigh up all the evidence, I guess, and all the bits of information. And
I'll have to try and find that website.
Yeah, actually, I'll send you the link.
Thanks, mate.
Downloaded it last week, and yeah, it's pretty interesting read.
All right.
Keith, can I go to something we were discussing on Tuesday with Margaret about her very recent visit to the railway, and you were talking about cholera and the Ramusha, and she was saying that I didn't quite catch on what you meant about the cholera. Was it the fact that the Tamils brought the cholera with them?
It was. She questioned Rod Beatty.
Yeah.
About the cholera, and Rod said, "Okay, where did the cholera come from?" So obviously, well, it's waterborne.
Yeah.
Yes, but where did the cholera come from?
Is it not naturally occurring in the environment, or does it come with people who then defecate and urinate?
I honestly cannot answer that one, but Rod Beatty's answer was India.
Well, that would seem to be the inference, and
that was the inference because it was, and from India would penetrate down into Burma and then into Thailand. India, yes, there used to be cholera outbreaks.
The Tamils are southern India and Sri Lanka, aren't they?
Tamils, I think, were Malaya as well, aren't they?
So I was I think that's what amazed me was that they'd actually then gone onto the railway. How did they get from there to the railway?
Most of I think a fair proportion of the labour recruited for the railways recruited from Malaya and Burma. May have brought some Tamils over from somewhere else, I don't know. They certainly used those in Indonesia as is now on the Sumatra Railway, because there was areas the POWs were not allowed to go on the railway, even though they had to build it. No, the Europeans didn't build it; the natives did.
Right.
And that was from Jeremy Farrell at the last conference.
Yeah.
And that's a nice website. I must get the website for Kevin, because he knows a fair bit about the Sumatra Railway because he lives out there.
Yeah.
And so we know there were some Indonesians as is working on that railway, But from what I understand, the bulk of the labour force from the railway were either from Burma, Malaya, Singapore, maybe Thailand to an extent, because Thailand was supposedly not at war with Japan. And she wasn't. She was allowed the Japanese troops on her soil. But yeah, I think Rod was saying to Margaret, well, you've got to look at the source, and the source was, as far as according to Rod, was India. And I'm not going to argue with him because I honestly don't know.
No, it was just interesting, and I thought, I must find out, about that, because I always think with the Ramusha, I don't think of them as being Tamils. I suppose because I don't know a lot about the railway, because that's not my area. But yeah, when that was mentioned, I thought this is strange. Why is he blaming the Ramusha for bringing the cholera?
Well, I think one thing that was evident from what the troops reported back anyway, and you see in the books, that they were recruited, if you like, under false pretenses. We will pay you well, we will feed you well. So they brought their wives and their families. Yeah. And if you like, once they realised that they had been lied to, again, only from what I read, they seemed to give up hope. And that was it. So you've got,
The question was raised about the condition of the camps and how awful it was when the men got there. Well, I should think that these poor people arrived there, and like you just said, they probably gave up. It wasn't what they were expecting.
No,
in terrible conditions.
They were fed even worse than the POWs.
Yeah.
And if you think, right, okay, no work, no food, well, the wife and children aren't going to work, are they?
No.
So you've got this horrible scenario. There are war crimes reports by some of the Burmese, so I found them. Not copied them, but I found them, and it gives you an indication of where the camps were. But it's something that I started doing something else. I've got to put that on the back burner, then go back to it and study that in depth. And there are war crimes files that this Japanese man beat so and so and all the rest of it, and you do start getting a little bit of insight as to what's actually been going on. But I think it's something we will never know. Never know how many died. Never know who they were. Because there were no Japanese records. I will bet there were Japanese records. I bet there were, but I bet
most of them. Most of them are still out there as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, they were offered no help, I would presume, at the end of the war. They were just left to their own means, weren't they? They didn't have the support of wherever they'd originated from to get them back.
Well, if they were Malays or Burmese, that would have been with the Brits. Because they were British colonies.
Did we help them? Because having talked to some of the internees, we didn't seem to help our own internees, did we?
No, well, we did, but you read some of the bureaucracy and you think to yourself, oh, good grief. Well, my wife was evacuated to Australia. Right. So where do you want to go back to, Mr. Internee? I go to Australia. Fine. Okay, so we can do that. Then we're going to go back to the UK. Fine. You pay for that. We don't. We liberate you to one country. That's it.
All right.
So,
I'm going to have to sign off, guys. It's dinner time over here.
Okay, mate.
So good talking to you again tonight.
Yeah.
And to you.
Yeah.
Night.
We'll speak again in a couple of weeks, maybe.
Yes, indeed. All right, mate. You take care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye. Yeah, it's one side, Barbara, really, that I'd have to see really what's at Kew and have a look. But I know I have done quite a bit, and I've uncovered quite a few coolie camps and quite a few coolie hospitals. So there was one at Kanchanaburi, coolie hospital, and I've uncovered the names of a few going up the line. But I've got to spend time really on concentrating what I want to complete first before starting anything else. But that is one of the subjects that's quite high on the agenda, so we could try and find out more what happened to them. I'll have a look at the HS files for you, no problem. I'm there on Saturday. Didn't go this week. I drove down the motorway part of the motorway. It's at just one junction to go shopping on Friday, and the car was being buffeted across the road. The winds were so high. So I'm not going to risk it.
No.
So I will go on the 23rd, 30th. I'm seeing a friend of mine, and then it'll be the first Saturday in April. I'll go back down there again.
Yeah.
So if I don't do it on Saturday, I'll do it the following week. But I've made a note.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing that's cropped up from what Martin was saying about hospital records, if you remember in December, one of our members sadly died very suddenly, and her father, who was there on the railway with Tom Horrobin's father or uncle, he didn't work very much because he'd had an injury and most of his time was spent in the hospitals. And I don't think you were able to find out much about him. I can't remember his name.
Didn't fill in the questionnaire.
That's it. And I'm wondering if he was in hospital.
I could look in 347. I've got the name, so I can have a look.
Yeah, it was what Martin said, just, that made me think, well, I wonder if that gentleman was perhaps in hospital and didn't fill out the questionnaire then.
I would think that the hospital files that we were talking about are the main base hospitals. But again, have a look and see what comes up. I'll have a look.
Yeah, just as a thought.
Yeah, no problem.
Right, well, I'm going to say bye-bye. I've got to go and take my mother out for lunch. So I will see you again soon. And nice to talk to you all.
Yeah, I'll see you on the next meeting in April.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll bring that film for you, unless you want to wait until next year or later in the year and see it at the Royal Philharmonic. Have you heard about that's what they're proposing? Have you heard from Meg Park?
I've asked Meg for details of the November stuff, and I've got nothing.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, there's quite a full weekend, and we need to talk about this, don't we? Kevin will know about this coming up. And one of the things that they're going to do, which quite stunned me really, having talked about this lately, they're proposing to show Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence at the Royal Philharmonic.
Oh, right.
Which I think will be a fantastic thing. It will really, cause a few talks.
Well, I did speak to Meg on Friday, and I said, look, can we just get some idea of what you want me to do? And she said, well, for the art exhibition, she said, I was a little bit reluctant to ask you to volunteer because there's no expenses. Yeah. It's going to be at your own cost. So I said, okay, fine. We can sort that out. But I said, I need to know about the November thing because I'm being asked about it, but I'm getting nothing back. And I think Pauline Simpson and her crew are going to be there, aren't they? From what I've heard.
That's the NEFRA weekend, isn't it? I think it's coincided with that. I don't know whether that's intentional.
No, I don't know whether it was. I thought they were going to be up there for the art exhibition, but perhaps I could be wrong. So,
well, it's at the same weekend as that apparently. So Pauline said
the art exhibition is in October. The art exhibition opens.
Yeah, it opens, but I think this weekend is November the 16th, 17th, and 18th of November, and it will include, amongst other things, this showing of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence at the Royal Philharmonic.
Have they said whether they're paying for the rooms or have you got to pay for your own?
For the NEFRA one, I think you'd need to contact Pauline Simpson about that. But if you haven't had the information from Meg about what they're proposing, I'll forward that to you if you like.
Could you? I won't tell Meg you've done it, but yeah, please.
Well, she wants us to start getting feedback on how many people go,
Well, she's not contacted COFEPO, I know that much.
Right.
No, sorry, I don't think she has. Let's leave it that way.
I don't know. I'd have to look on the list of fellow people that she sent it to, but you're involved with the Research in FEPOW History Group, so I know she won't mind if I send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
And I shall put it in my next news sheet. And I've asked Ken to put it in the newsletter that we do too. So
good, okay.
Because she needs to get the numbers, so so that Meg and her team can plan.
Yep.
Right, I will sign off and see you again soon. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Bye, Kevin.
Bye.
See you, Keith.
Okay.
Well.
All right. Let's just shut down stop recording.